Show notes. Welcome to Backpacker Radio, presented by The Trek, brought to you by backcountry.com. I'm your co-host, Zach Badger Davis, and sitting in Lakewood somewhere is...
Hi, I'm Juliana Chauncey, aka Chaunce.
Question of the day. This is a fun one. A burglar breaks into your home, but he only wants the stuff on the top of your fridge. What is he going to steal? So did you interpret this as the top shelf, or what is sitting on top of your refrigerator?
I think both are fair game. I was kind of thinking about that too, and then I was like, I guess both are fair game.
I'm in the kitchen right now, and as that question was asked, I immediately looked to the top of the fridge. Okay,
we got one ruling there.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with the top shelf because I don't even think that there's anything on top of my refrigerator. Or I could be wrong about that.
Wow. I don't believe you. There's no way Jenna doesn't put something on top of your fridge.
Oh, you know what? We might have like a Ziploc bag of manuals and like warranty cards for appliances.
Yeah, you do. That's what he's gonna get then. Well, no, he's probably gonna get what's in your shelves too. So the top of my fridge, he's gonna go home with a nice rice cooker and a bowl of refreezable ice cubes. That you don't have room in the freezer for.
Refreezable ice cubes? What is that?
Those plastic little like squares that have liquid inside, but the plastic separates the liquid from the drink, so you can put them back in the freezer and refreeze them. They look like ice cubes, but they're plastic.
Yeah, are those dishwasher safe? Do you have to wash those by hand?
We put them through the dishwasher. So unless I don't know for sure. But we put them in the dishwasher, and I'm still here.
Yeah, you're here to tell about it. So
that he's gonna get some of those. He's gonna get some stale cereal. And if he went into the cabinet, he would get a lot of backpacking food. That's where I put all the backcountry fuel boxes.
Sweet. There's a lot happening on top of your fridge.
Yeah.
I know, that's way more interesting than the top of my fridge here. I'm at a friend's house, but like from the vantage point I have, like we're looking at maybe like a couple like Keurig portable K-cups.
Okay.
There seems to be like a really healthy supply up there. There's a white basket with some items I can't really make out, maybe some vitamins. Not as interesting of a prize as what is in Chaunce's vicinity. That's for sure.
Hopefully he strikes better luck at Zach's house. What's he getting when he comes to you?
Yeah, if you're turning to a life of crime and you're only grabbing like some Keurig cups and a manual, like I feel bad for you. You can have that stuff. But
yeah, I mean the fact that you guys don't have a lot of stuff on top of your fridge just leads me to believe you have more kitchen space than I do.
I've also been like maniacally cleaning because I'm getting overwhelmed with all the baby stuff flooding my house, but that's neither here nor there. Let's jump into today's interview. You've already heard his voice a little bit. This is a man that has been requested many times. We were supposed to make it happen in person last year, but the world imploded, as you already know. His name is Philip Carcia. Did I say that right?
It's Carcia, actually.
Carcia. You sent me the phonetic spelling, and then I forgot to put it in my notes, and I was just going off of rote memory, and I fucked it up.
All good.
For those who are not familiar, Philip has got quite the hiking resume. I'm just going to hit on like some of the big points here, and then you can kind of fill in the gaps for us. How does that sound?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great.
So you've got the New Hampshire 48 single year grid over the course. Is that 2 years, 2018 and 2019, or is that over? Yeah, I guess single year grid.
We'll get into it, but yeah, it was from the last week of August 2018 to the first week of July in 2019. Yep.
So single year, not calendar year. Got it. Okay. And
correct.
Then the White Mountain Direttisima. Did I say that right?
Direttisima is the way that I pronounce it, but I think like my last name, the jury could still be out on exact pronunciation.
Yeah. And we'll get deep into what that is. The New Hampshire 48 times 16. I'm going to need some clarification on that one myself.
I'm not sure if I wrote that or what that is, but I've hiked the New Hampshire 48, all 48 4,000 footers actually 17 individual times.
17 times. Okay.
Yeah, 17. Yeah,
I
17
thought that's
individual
what that
times.
meant. I was reading this out loud before the interview, and my housemate saw that, and he's like, "Does that mean he did it 16 times?" I was like, "I think so. I think so."
Yeah. I'm not sure if I wrote that in the little cheat sheet or what. If I did, it should have been 17, and I don't even remember alluding to that, to be honest with you. But yeah, I've climbed the 48 4,000 footers.
That was
17.
likely either me or at least scraping that from somewhere that is obviously out of date. And then the last one here that I think is worth mentioning is the White Mountain Redline FKT, which we'll get into that as well, because I'll be learning a lot about this as we go. But I know that obviously you have kicked a lot of ass in New England, and I can't wait to talk all about it.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
Yeah, so if you could start off with giving us like the kind of the overview of your how you got into hiking, where you're based out of, kind of like the more basic bullet points.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to both of you guys for the invitation to come on. This is pretty awesome for me. Like you said, Zach, my name is Phil Carcia. I'm a hiker, I'm a runner, I'm a peak bagger, originally from a city in central Massachusetts called Worcester. And now super lucky to be living in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, living and working full time in North Woodstock, New Hampshire, in the heart of the White Mountains. And super lucky. I'm 37 now. I went for my first hike when I was 16 years old. So I've been hiking for a little over 20 years. The first hike I went on was in central Massachusetts on a tiny little mountain out there called Mount Wachusett, little 2,000-foot peak. And that, to make a really long story short, kind of really conjured up a pretty deep sense of curiosity for me personally, in terms of just seeing what was out there in Massachusetts for mountains, and New England for mountains, and in the United States and North America for mountains and long distance trails. And over the course of the last 20 years, I've been really lucky to kind of have the good fortune to hike some of the a lot of the very iconic long distance trails that you guys talk about on this show all the time. So I've done the Long Trail, the Colorado Trail, the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the John Muir Trail, the Tahoe Rim, to name a few. But as you've kind of alluded to, Zach, over the last several years, really, I guess 2017, 2018 up until now, I've put 110% of my focus, my time, my energy, my effort, and my attention into the White Mountains of New Hampshire, because they're really, after hiking Mount Wachusett when I was, again, back 16, 17 years old, the Whites were the place that I came up to cut my teeth, so to speak. This is the place that I came up to and started spending nights outside, started doing higher mileage days, started to kind of really see what my body was capable of doing. And, along the way, making all those super classic mistakes that, everybody, starts to make when they're just starting to spend time in the outdoors. And it just kind of, the White Mountains became a very, very special place to me personally, and a place that just kind of sort of etched its way into my heart and soul. And like I said, over the last couple of years, I've been spending most of my time pursuing long distance hiking, peak bagging lists, endurance based pursuits, like right here in New England.
Chaunce just sent me a note. She thinks that potentially your hair is actually brushing up against your mic. Is there a way you could tuck it back?
Wow.
To be honest with you, I didn't even notice it. It's pretty subtle, so it's not a big deal at all. But
listen, guys, you're not the first person to suggest that the lion's mane is getting a little out of control.
How long has that been growing? That's an impressive, as you put it, lion's mane. This
is going to sound wild, but this has been growing since I started the single year grid in 2018. I'm like a big fan of just like mechanisms to keep you fully committed to the mission at hand. And when I started this whole thing up in the Whites a couple years ago, I said I want to do the two biggest, two most iconic list-based projects in the Whites back to back, and I wasn't going to cut my hair until those were finished. And here we are, man. Now the mics are now the hair is just full on blocking microphones, in interviews with the Trek. It's crazy.
I'm officially dropping the ball in the luscious hair department between the three of us. I apologize for that. So I think one thing that stood out to me is that you said your first hike was when you were 16 years old. I'm curious,
Yeah.
what was your upbringing like up until the age of 16? Because I feel like New England has a pretty strong hiking culture, and to go 16 years without hiking is surprising to me.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would absolutely echo that sentiment. New England has an incredible hiking and peakbagging culture. Worcester, Massachusetts, not so much. For the first 16 years of my life, sounds a little strange. I had a, reasonably normal kind of existence, reasonably normal kind of upbringing. Nobody in my family was particularly drawn to the outdoors. Nobody in my family spent any kind of serious time in the outdoors. But as a 16-year-old, as a junior in high school, I was very fortunate to have a family friend take me to the summit of Wachusett on, beautiful summer day. And yeah, again, like not having been in that environment before, never having been on a trail, not really knowing what hiking was, getting up to the summit of Mount Wachusett, which again is only a 2,000-foot peak, but looking out and seeing the city of Worcester, seeing the city that I grew up in from a completely different perspective, and looking out to the west and, not knowing what I was looking at, but seeing the Berkshires, and looking north and not knowing what I was looking at, but seeing the whites. It was just, it felt like, in a strange way, it was a long time coming. And again, it just sparked this super intense sense of curiosity. I just remember, going home and jumping on, what was the internet in those days, which was AOL dial-up, and just, going online and trying to find anything and everything I could about, what I was seeing and how I could see more of it.
Did it snowball immediately from there? Like, were you out hiking consistently from there on out, or did it take a while to really get into what ended up being your thru hikes and then all your peak bagging?
Yeah, it absolutely snowballed, and that's the perfect way to describe it. It was a long, slow slide, for lack of a better description. So I went for my first hike at 16. I think it was probably the year 2000, 2001. And between 2001 and really 2006, so let's say about 5 years, it was super, super recreational. I knew I was interested, but I didn't quite know how interested I was. I knew what I was doing was unlike anything I had ever, done before, kind of like going to the Whites, going back to Wachusett, exploring, the depths of my physicality and what I could do with my body. I knew it was really tough, and I wasn't sure how far I wanted to take it. So it was like very slow. It was a progression over those 5 years. I really dipped my toes into the water and then would pull them out and dip them back in again. And in 2006, I read about a long distance hiking trail that goes through the state of Massachusetts, my home state. Not a lot of people talk about this or even know about it. It's a trail called the Mid-State Trail. It's 92 miles long, very, very easy by all accounts, goes straight over the summit of Mount Wachusett. And, had always kind of like read in my research about the AT and had met Appalachian Trail thru hikers as I was cutting my teeth in the whites. And again, like was drawn to that world just as much as I was to the Wachusett and the hiking world initially. And, just said to myself, if I'm going to try to do something long distance, if I actually really think I could go out and walk, all these hundreds of miles and have a shot at something like the long trail, have a shot at something like the AT, I should probably start a little bit smaller. And in 2006, ended up going out and attempting the long trail, the Mid-State Trail in Massachusetts, and failed absolutely miserably. Ended up, there's an incredible photograph on my Instagram page of my beginning photo from that trip in 2006. And I've got on a pair of Adidas for my hiking shoes. I've got on cargo shorts. I've got an Abercrombie and Fitch t-shirt on. I've got a North Face hat, and I've got a 55-liter expedition size North Face backpack to walk across central Massachusetts in the middle of summer. It was absolutely ridiculous. And, my results out there, spoke for themselves. I mean, I had to get off trail after 30 miles, just because I had, very, very insufficient gear for the task at hand, and didn't know what I was doing. But you know, again, the snowball sort of was rolling, and I went back that summer and I finished the Mid-State Trail in sections and fine-tuned my kit, and went back that fall and really dialed things in and started looking at the long trail, and went out the following year and hiked the long trail in 2007, and, you know, got through that, and, you know, one, you know, straight 28-day through hike, and you know, for lack of a better description, I mean, the rest is kind of history. I mean, I think you guys both kind of know how this story goes, right? Like, you get onto the trail and you have this incredible, larger than life experience. A lot of times it sort of exceeds like all of your other, you know, prior life experiences leading up to that point, and you get off and you don't know what to think. You don't know how to feel. You just know that your life has changed, and you know that you want a whole lot more. And that's how, you know, that's how I felt. And, you know, went out the next year, hiked the AT, went out the following year, hiked the Colorado Trail to get that, you know, taste of the Western network, and followed that up with the PCT and a few other, you know, smaller Western trails. And all of that kind of, you know, led me to, you know, back to the White Mountains, and ultimately where I am today. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, Zach, but ultimately, you know, people over the last couple of years have just started to take notice of the things that I'm doing in the mountains. And you know, I laugh because I'm super humbled by it, but also because, like, I've been slowly chipping away at this life, and kind of dedicating myself to this lifestyle and this life practice for almost 20 years. You know, it's definitely been a long, wild, slow ride.
Chaunce, didn't you say that you were a greeter for Abercrombie?
It was actually Hollister, and I stood at the door and I would say, "Hi, welcome to Hollister. Have you visited our cheeky cousin Gilly Hicks down the hall?" And then they would ignore me and continue shopping.
You know what's amazing is that you remember that verbatim, but how long it took you to get the subtitle for your book down.
Well, I mean, that's like remembering someone's phone number from when you met them in kindergarten.
I'm not throwing shade. It might just be an age thing, because I remember music lyrics from like the 90s way better than anything that I've listened to recently. So I don't know how that works. But Phil, before we move on to the next questioning, I just want to, I think that the mic is still rubbing up against like your hood or something. I'm not sure what the solution is. It's not a big deal. If you could just like maybe like lean forward, or like whatever you think would create a gap.
I think I got the remedy.
Yeah, it's just making sure this thing doesn't hit anything, because when this rubs, that's when you hear
it. Chaunce, say the greeting line again.
Hi, welcome to Hollister. Have you visited our cheeky cousin Gilly Hicks down the hall?
A cheesy cousin Gilly Hicks?
Cheeky cousin Gilly Hicks, because it is an Australian lingerie.
Isn't Hollister, are they based in California? Isn't Hollister California?
Hollister is California, like just like clothing. Abercrombie is like East Coast, somewhere based clothing. They had Gilly Hicks, which was the Australian underwear. And then they had another one, Rule. Rule was one that was, I think it was called Rule.
What is
after?
We'll get back to the important hiking stuff here in a second, but what is Australian underwear? How I didn't know there was like,
it's just like Gilly Hicks was apparently like an Australian like company under the umbrella company of all the different Hollister,
is it a different style? Like is the underwear in a boomerang shape?
It was very seductive for children. A lot of thongs, a lot of lace, not a lot of.
I'm blown away that like this is a legitimate name for a store. I thought this was just like a catchphrase that they had you guys reciting like at the entrance to the store. Gilly
that's
Hicks
why we say cheeky cousin, because we're talking about your butt.
Wow. This is, guys, I may be learning just as much today as like the people who end up listening to this episode.
Okay, hold on.
It's very, very informative.
I know what the code word's going to be already for the free sticker comment.
For the Patreon people, here you go.
Whoa. Oh, I love this.
Are they still selling the Gilly Hicks? The cheeky Gilly Hicks?
Like you don't want your 16-year-old in it. You know? It seems like it's gotten a little more age appropriate since I left, but let's see. I guess they included more clothes. Here we go, Gilly Hicks. Bralettes.
Dreamworthy soft ribbed tee.
Exactly, like dream-worthy fun.
Okay, enough of
yeah.
the enough of the free ad for Hollister for all of our 16-year-old listeners.
Out there.
Yeah. So Philip, you've got a ton on your hiking resume, as you kind of like briefly outlined. I want to dive into the meat of it. We've talked to a lot of people that have hiked the AT, PCT, the Long Trail. I want to talk about the New Englander stuff. So first, let's start with some definitions. I want to know, tell us what the single year grid is.
Yeah, I'll give you guys as much context as possible. I think it'll be pretty helpful here. So first I'll tell you what the grid is. So as I kind of mentioned, New England, a little bit more specifically, the White Mountains is a very list-based culture. We've got a list-based hiking culture. There's a bunch of different lists, sort of official lists that have been compiled by different organizations. And, these lists are pursued by many, if not most, of the hikers that come up to the White Mountains. These could be lists of summits. These could be lists of trails, what have you. The grid refers to the act of hiking all 48 4,000 footers in the White Mountains. So there's 48 peaks in the White Mountains of New Hampshire that are 4,000 feet or higher. This includes Mount Washington. Mount Washington is the highest at 6,288. And, people come up and recreationally climb all 48 4,000 footers over all different types of, seasons and terrain conditions and what have you, and may take a single season or a few years to knock off the 48. But the grid refers to the act of hiking all 48 4,000 footers in every calendar month. So you're talking about 48 4,000 footers times 12 months. That's 576 summits. You're looking at about 2,800 to 3,000 miles. And you're looking at about 1 million feet of vertical gain through, like I said, all 12 months on a very rocky, rooty, technical, and oftentimes like unpredictable trail network, right? So that is the grid. And to the best of my knowledge, there's about 100 finishers, maybe just over 100 finishers now, all-time finishers. And the vast majority of these people complete the grid over many, many, many years, right? Because you're climbing in all 12 months, all different seasons, all different conditions. People work, people have family commitments, what have you. This is something that usually people take on over the course of many, many years.
So can I interrupt you quickly?
Of course, yeah.
So like a traditional grid would be, let's say I hike all of the 4,800 footers in like the month of January in 2012, and then I would do it in February in 2014, and then March in 2016. Am I getting the right idea?
You are, but I mean, you very infrequently see someone going out and like taking on all of March in one single month, or taking on, all of February or all of January. Usually it's like, okay, I'm working a full-time job, got a couple kids, I can hike on the weekends. Maybe I'm reasonably local to the White Mountains. This is a goal that I can see, knocking off in 2 to 5 years. So in January, maybe I've got a ton of commitments and we're just after the holiday season, I can only get 15 peaks, right? And then February, maybe I'm totally wasted after January and I only get 2 peaks. And then maybe March, I don't get anything, and it just kind of depends on your level of discipline, your level of ambition, your free time, these types of things. So
you're really tracking it. Like you really need to have like a list, like you said, in order to be able to not forget which of the 48 you did in that 1 year, in that 1 month, 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. This is official, guys. Like if you go to 48 times 12, 48x12.com, this is the official site for the grid. And this is the site that you can download the spreadsheet. This is the site that you submit your spreadsheet to after you finish the grid and actually want to get recognition on the website as an official finisher. This is the same place that you submit the data for your red line, which we'll get into. This is a kind of a hub for this list-based culture in the White Mountains. So yeah, it's pretty serious. People keep track over time. Where this story starts to get a little bit interesting is in 2016, a very well-known ultra marathon runner, endurance pioneer, a woman by the name of Sue Johnston, otherwise known as Snow Flea. She's an AT thru-hiker, former AT thru-hiker, former John Muir Trail record holder, FKT record holder. She went out and she completed the first calendar year grid. So in January 2016, she started and completed all 48 4,000 footers, restarted in February, hiked all 48 4,000 footers, restarted in March, so on and so forth until the month of December. And then finished her last round of 48 4,000 footers on December 26th, 2016, and she became the first known person to complete the calendar year grid. And obviously, like in the community in the White Mountains, me as like, you know, a White Mountain head, just like someone who's crazy about this region, it was and still is, in my opinion, like one of the boldest acts of endurance like in the Northeast. And it was one of the biggest incomplete projects, one of the last like undone firsts, you know, in this place that is so saturated with hikers, in this place where everything's been done. You know, what she did was pretty incredible, you know, to average 250 miles a month, to average 80,000 feet a month, and be out there, you know, all 48 peaks and the kinds of weather that you can get, you know, not only in the winter, but also in those shoulder seasons up here. It was super, super impressive. And, you know, it just inspired me through the roof. And, you know, looking at what she did, it was really interesting because, of course, no one had ever completed the calendar year grid before. No one had ever started and finished the full grid in that short of a time. And so, you know, she was very public. Sue was very public about saying, you know, even though like I set the fastest known time here, even though I've, you know, kind of unofficially set the fastest known time, that was never my goal. What I wanted to do was the first calendar year grid. And she said, if someone wanted to come along and actually whittle the grid down to the lowest possible elapsed time, this is what you would do. And I'm reading this on a comment thread, I think on fastestknowntime.com. This is in like 2016, late 2016. And what she explains is this, and it's super fascinating, man. And it still kind of like haunts me to this day. She talks about how you should get she talks about how, you know, if you want to hike all 48 4,000 footers every month, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take all month to hike all 48 4,000 footers, right? So if you were to train all year and you waited until a month like August, and you waited until, let's say, the last 8 days of August, and you hiked all 48 4,000 footers the last 8 days of August and kind of started your clock there, right? And then you went through September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, hiked all 48 within those months. Doesn't matter how fast or how slow, because if you finish early, you still got to wait till the first to start back up again. And then in that last month, in July, your hypothetical last month, what you want to do is you want to finish all 48 as quickly as you can. And let's say at that point, you're really fit and you finish it in something like 6 days. You know, what you have is a full grid, start to finish, from the moment that you get on the trail, you know, in late August to the moment you quote unquote get off the trail in early July. You have a full grid, all 48 4,000 footers in every calendar month in an elapsed time of about 319 days. And that would have hypothetically shaved, you know, 5 weeks off of Sue Johnston's quote fastest known time. And to make a really long story short, you know, reading that was really all that I took. From that point forward, for the next couple of years, I had a very, very hard time sleeping at night. And it was all I thought about. It was all I saved my money for. It was really just this omnipresent goal that I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to go out and see if I could accomplish, and kind of give a little hat tip to Sue, because she was and still is just like a hero of mine, and someone that I see as one of the boldest athletes, you know, not female athletes, but athletes in the White Mountains. And yeah, man, in late 2018, August 2018, after a few years of plotting and scheming and planning and saving, I set out in pursuit of the first known single year grid, and to lower Sue Johnston's unofficial fastest known time by as much as I could. And, you know, a lot of stories in between there, but I ended up doing just that. I ended up hiking all 48 4,000 footers in 319 elapsed days between, I believe, the 23rd of August 2018 and July 6th 2019. I ended up hiking the full grid, 576 peaks in 319 elapsed days.
Okay, question. So when I think about like Colorado 14ers, which would be like the equivalent type of list out here, just getting from one to like another for a lot of them, like there's like driving, there's, you know, hours spent in the car, they're in different sides of the state. 250 miles, you know, if you're thinking about it start to finish on a long distance trail, you know, that's fine, that's like 2 weeks. But what about like the driving and everything? Can you have a life as well, or is it like drive go drive go drive go? Like what's the time spent in the month like? Are there loop trails that connect them, or easy peaks to combine?
Yeah, that's actually a big question, and it's really interesting. I'll mention, like, when I first started planning this endeavor, and all the way up until the week before I started, I was putting money away so that I could live in the back of my truck for a year and literally have no work responsibilities, no employment responsibilities. Because, yeah, Chaunce, to your point, like, there's so much more to take into consideration outside of the hiking. Like, you need to navigate to the trailheads. You need to, you know, spend time on the road, you know, driving to these places, preparing food for your hikes. You know, we have super wild weather in the Northeast. So just getting to some of these places is really difficult. But I've mentioned them before, previously in this conversation. About a week before I started the single year grid, I saw a help wanted advertisement on Facebook for the Notch Hostel, which is a pretty popular hostel in North Woodstock along the AT, and they were looking for someone to jump on and kind of be a jack of all trades, do, you know, front desk work, do housekeeping, what have you, but in exchange for a pretty sweet accommodation on the back of their property in a small little tiny house. And I jumped at that chance, knew I was signing on to so much more than I could probably juggle or handle with a sane and rational mind. But it was the universe opening up, and an opportunity that I couldn't refuse, to have a warm place, like, centrally located in the White Mountains. And so to your point, I think in regular circumstances, if you had nothing to tend to in your life except for this challenge, you would be doing mostly hiking and not spending much of your time doing anything else, but besides the resupply, the food, the logistics, and the driving. To add in a full-time job, for me personally, between the job and actually the peak bagging, especially with the kind of winter that we had in 2018, 2019 in the White Mountains, which was absolutely record setting and a precedent. There was nothing else. I mean, it was I've used this phrase so many times, and I love it because it's so accurate. It was a monk-like kind of existence, where it was like, in the morning, if I had to work and do housekeeping at the hostel, I'd be up super early. I'd get all that taken care of. And then in the afternoon, I'd go out into the mountains and I'd walk, into the night. And then vice versa. If I had to, work in the evening, if I had to do check-in, if I had to do housekeeping, I'd make sure all my stuff was together the night before. I'd be out on the road super early, driving anywhere from, the closest 4,000 footer was Mount Moosilauke on the AT, 5 miles up the road. And the furthest one was probably Mount Cabot, which is in the northern reaches of the National Forest, probably about 2 hours away. So I was up driving these roads in the dark by myself, climbing these peaks in the dark by myself, and then getting back for work. It was a completely, a completely purist kind of monk-like existence. I was tending to very few other things outside of like the task at hand, and just like making sure that I got all 48 peaks in by the last day of the month, which I think you'll kind of understand how full life was at that time and how close I came because of how full life was when I tell you that 6 out of the 12 months I finished on the very, very last day of the month.
So one thing that like this might like really get under the skin of any listener in New England, but I'm just curious. What is the appeal of redoing it 12 times? Because like if you told me that the Colorado Trail was like the challenge was doing it every month for 12 months, I'd be like, why would I re-see that trail 12 times when I could spend those 11 months seeing other things or like
Yes.
doing hiking other places? Like what makes it appealing to do the same hike over and over and over 12 times?
Yeah, Chaunce, I'm gonna give you like a very generic answer, but it's probably the answer that like you'll hear most commonly when this question is asked, like up in this neck. And it's also just like so true because it is genuinely never the same hike. Especially in a place like the White Mountains where, you know, we experience like the extremes of all four seasons. In a place like the White Mountains where, you know, even though our peaks really only like tap out at 6,000 feet, you know, there can be heavy, you know, temperature and condition fluctuations from, you know, the valley all the way up to 4,000 feet. You know, just because you're going out to, you know, the same high point every month doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the same experience, especially when you're like comparing and contrasting, you know, golden, beautiful, iconic autumnal days with, you know, a full range of color spread across the Pemigewasset wilderness and peak foliage. And, you know, when you compare that against like a downright brutal and deadly day on Mount Washington where the temperatures are, you know, dipping into the negative double digits and you're just, you know, you're genuinely just happy to make it off the, you know, the mountain alive and everything in between. It genuinely never felt like the hikes were the same experience. And you know what, also, I think there's something to be said for the vastness of the trail network in the White Mountains. Like we're going to talk a little bit about the Red Line, and the Red Line is the act of hiking all 652 trails listed in the official White Mountains Guide, you know, the book that's published by the AMC. And, you know, we think about 48 high peaks. We don't realize that there's over 1,400 miles of trail to get to these high points, you know, to get to these high peaks. And for me, I mean, obviously I was limited a little bit because I was working a lot and I had to be back to, you know, work at certain times. And I had other responsibilities that I was making sure I was tending to. So I couldn't necessarily go out there every day with just this wanderlust. I'll get back, you know, whenever I get back. It was a little more structured like that, but so many days out there it was just like, okay, cool, like I've been to Owl's Head, you know, 4 times now, 5 times now. Let's take the back road in, you know, let's take the back way in, let's take the less traveled route, let's take a few of these slides that exist in the White Mountains, these huge natural exposed slides that fall you know, naturally in the White Mountains up on the sides of some of these 4,000 footers. Like, you know, we're in a place that is so populated, so saturated, but you would be absolutely blown away how different of an experience you can have on these peaks from one month to the next. And I'll just say in closing, you know, when you're dealing with the type of individual like me who actually like is drawn to challenges in the outdoors that have a infectious repetition, you know, a kind of repetitive element to them. I mean, this for me, like the whole repeating these peaks, like that element of boredom that does kind of exist, even if the hikes are feeling, you know, very different, very unique each time. That kind of boredom that kind of enters the scenario. I mean, for me, that all just kind of starts to fall into the, you know, then the mental and the psychological challenge, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, maybe you're going to get a couple hikes out to the longest, the most remote, the least aesthetically beautiful, you know, peak. Maybe you're going to get a few of those hikes that feel the same, just feel like work. But I was always okay with that, because it was like, this was supposed to be hard. You know, this was supposed to be me going to the mountains where I cut my teeth, you know, this trail network that is revered for its tumultuous weather, its, you know, rough and technical terrain, and really see if I can, you know, step up to the plate and come out the other side and hit every mark that I want to hit. So I totally understand, you know, your question, but I think when you come out here and you actually really kind of isolate yourself to this area fully for a year, you know, you'll see very quickly, like, the amount of experiences you have can vary quite a bit.
So it's been a minute since we've had a chance to play this game. Fuck, marry, kill. So you get to fuck, marry, kill. You get to,
yes.
I guess typically there's 3 choices. I guess you've got 12 now. But fuck, marry, kill the months of hiking in New England.
Yes, I love this. Guys, I'm honored to be a part of this segment.
I think you can fuck 4 of them, you can marry 4 of them, and you can kill 4 of them. That way we get all.
Chaunce is a polygamist.
Fuck, marry, kill. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Let me see. If I could, let's see, if I could kill a month, it would probably be April. And the reason for that is just because usually in April, a lot of the snowpack still exists in the high country, but now the temperatures are starting to make it up to elevation. The higher, you know, the warmer temperatures are making it up to elevation. So you have maybe 3, 4, 5 feet of snowpack that's now kind of like rotting from the bottom out. And, you know, you just have snow melting and falling on you from the trees. You'll be in your snowshoes on like a very, what appears to be well-packed monorail. And you just step into it and sink down because it's totally rotten, you know, rotten snow, sink down to your knees, your hips. So if I had to fuck a particular, if I had to kill,
no, we can just do one of each. We can do one of each. I like Zach's idea better. It made sense in my head more than actuality.
Yeah. If I had to kill a particular month, I say that it would be April, for sure. If I had to marry a particular month, I actually, I think it would probably be like August. You know, not quite into that pristine, beautiful, iconic, you know, fall foliage, but you know, daytime temperatures are warm, nighttime temperatures are cool, water is still reasonably available, bugs are gone, and it's just like one of those months you want to spend the rest of your life with, man. You know, you just want to grit it over and over. So I would definitely over and over and over. So I would definitely kill off April. I would definitely wet up August, and then I think probably early October it would just be, you know, a slash fest. It would just be you know, it would be a real sight to see.
But you also have to take the full month into account. You get the latter half of October too,
which
you get the dark side.
Yeah, October can be a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type month, where it starts off real normal and seemingly you know, fuckable, and then toward the end of the month, you know, it's almost like you know, things take a turn for the worse. But you know what, Zach, I'm willing to take that gamble.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm willing to take that gamble, and I would say, you know, again, kill off April, marry August, and you know, smash town in October.
You like a freak in the sheets is what you're saying.
Hey, you said that, not me. Come on now.
Okay, Chaunce, I'm trying to think if we've got any other worthwhile questions about the grid before we move on. We could probably do a full interview on the grid itself, but there's so much to get to.
I just want to know, like, so just to jump backwards a little bit before we jump forwards,
yeah.
The double single winter 48, what's the difference between like doing part of your grid and doing that? Because like the grid's got to be the winter too, right?
Yeah. So that was in 2016, and that was when I first started. You know, that was the same actual winter that Sue was out there doing her calendar year grid. And you know, I'd be lying if I said that I hadn't thought about attempting the calendar year grid prior to 2016. I had no idea Sue was going to was going to attempt that. I had no idea that anyone was even considering it. And before I had like learned about her attempt, I actually went up to the White Mountains. I was living in Worcester, Massachusetts at the time. I moved up to the White Mountains for the winter of 2016, and I did a double single winter. So, you know, you'll hear people say, oh, I did a single winter 48. It's very popular to come up here and go through all 48 4,000 footers once in a single winter season. It's very, very popular, very, very tough, but very, very popular. And at that time in 2016, I think maybe 5 people had completed a double winter or double single winter. And knowing that, you know, at some point I could very likely want to come up and do something like the calendar year grid, you know, not knowing Sue was working on it at the time, I came up and I hiked, you know, 2 complete rounds of the 48 in a single winter season, and just kind of like see for myself, like, is this something that I could actually take on? You know, could I be up here in the winter, hike all 48 4,000 footers in January, go through that full experience, restart in February, do it again, and more importantly, like, enjoy myself while I was doing that. And I had never done any kind of like real intense winter hiking before, certainly not in the White Mountains. And I wasn't sure. I had a lot of questions that I needed to answer, and I didn't want to just like bite it off like as one big attempt, not knowing. I wanted to go up and kind of meticulously work my way up to this. So I went up there and I did the double single season in 2016, and walked away from that experience feeling like, yes, I can absolutely see myself doing this. In December, Sue finishes the first calendar year grid. The entire community is blown away. And yeah, before the turn of the year, I'm reading her comments on fastest known time, and my brain is turning, and I'm you know, more sure than unsure that this is, you know, the attempt on the single year grid is going to be something that I do. And so, you know, you kind of see there the triple single season, when I was actually working on the single year grid, as part of that project, as kind of like a little bit of a superlative, something to keep me focused, something to keep me inspired, especially during the winter months, especially as I was kind of reaching that halfway mark, which can come with a lot of really difficult psychological things. You know, I just wanted to stay focused and stay inspired. And so I made sure that I got, you know, 3 full rounds of the White Mountain 48, you know, obviously in the months that I needed, but also in that single winter season too, both, you know, step the bar up a little bit. There'd only been one other person who had completed the triple single season at that time. And again, also just keep myself focused and keep myself hungry for it and inspired as I, you know, moved through the winter and into the spring.
Has anyone done either the calendar or the single year grid since?
There has been one start in earnest, which did not go through to completion. Other than that, there's been no attempts or finishes.
Why do you think that is? Is that just because it's such an insane feat, or there's just so much competition in terms of FKTs and peak bagging, this, that, the other?
You know what, man? I think to a certain degree, people, you know, when I explain this the way that I have, you know, I explain this to people the way that I have to you guys in this podcast. A lot of times, like, people are at the end still trying to like fully wrap their head around the math and playing with the dates and the elapsed time and these types of things. So there's a part of me that thinks that a project like this is so fringe edge. It's so far out there on the edge of like what's been done and what people are truly interested in committing themselves to in the White Mountains and otherwise, that it just kind of, it kind of remains there. To a certain group of people, it's kind of hard to understand. It's kind of hard to contextualize. But like, yes, overall, I think that, you know, people look at something like this as an oddity. You know, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, this is like, in terms of actual like elapsed time working on something, you know, this is like probably the longest duration, fastest known time in existence. It's on kind of a little bit of a different level. And even if you do wrap your head around it, and even if you you can somehow finesse your time and your money, to actually, step up to the plate. I mean, there's just certain things that you have to be willing to walk through and deal with on an endurance challenge like this, a list like this, that I think a lot of people aren't willing to deal with. I mean, 250 miles a month, on your cul-de-sac, on your beautiful country road out your front door is hard enough to log. Never mind 250 miles with 80,000 feet on a ridiculous trail network that will take you from temperatures anywhere 80 to 90 degrees, above to 30 to 40 below with the wind chill. I mean, when you factor all these things together, talk about 1,000,000 feet in a year or 1,000,000 feet in less than 10 and a half months if you're going for the fastest known time. And then you start, going on Finding Philip's Facebook page and Instagram and see all the wild shit that I was going through out there in that record-breaking winter. I think it's easy to kind of see why people would be discouraged from taking on something like this, or, don't even really know where to start with something like this. But I think ultimately it's many factors. It's the fact that it's such a behemoth hiking project when you look at the numbers and the amount of time you need to invest. And it also truly represents the fringe edge of what's being done in endurance in the Northeast and the White Mountains. And those two components, I think they make it a very, a very rare kind of diamond.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So we could do an entire show just on the grid, but there's
Definitely
a lot that I want to get to here. So if you're cool with it, I think we'll move on to, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation again, the Direttisima. Oh, tell me the correct way to say it, and I promise to butcher it only 3 or 4 more times.
Yeah, I mean, I pronounce it Direttisima. So
Direttisima.
Direttisima.
You've done it. You get the ultimate say on how it's said. So Direttisima.
Oh, yeah, I think Direttisima, Direttisima. It's actually it's an Italian word. It's like alpinist terminology. It loosely translates to the most direct route, and it's usually used in like a climbing or an alpine context. In the context of the White Mountain 48, the White Mountains Direttisima is a through hike of the 48 4,000 footers. And so basically what you do is you start at the northernmost 4,000 footer and work your way south. So Mount Cabot to Mount Moosilauke, or you start at the southernmost 4,000 footer and work your way north from Moosilauke to Cabot. And you are effectively traveling like what you see as the most direct line, the most direct route. There is no official set of trails. There is no official route. There is no guidebook. There is no data book. It is effectively the route that you see the most fit, and that represents the most direct line, that you see fit. And so most people walk away with between 215 and 230 miles. Again, you're going to climb about 80,000 feet. You're going to hike all 48 4,000 footers, and you're going to walk every foot of land in between these peaks. And what I ended up doing was because I saw this as a really unique opportunity to make the single year grid even more difficult, in that very first month and that very last month, right? So the only 2 months of the single year grid where I had any influence over the elapsed time of the project, the only 2 months where it was really in my best interest to be hiking these peaks as quickly, as efficiently as possible, I did the opposite, because I didn't want to cut any corners, because I wanted to, give myself what I consider myself, giving myself fully to this project. I replaced those 2 rounds with through hikes of the 48 White Mountain Direttisimas, because that is, the least efficient way to hike these 48 4,000 footers. So it's basically a through hike of the 48, a through hike of the White Mountain 48. Like I said, 215 to 230 miles. In 2018, when I completed, my first White Mountain Direttisima, I was the 10th known finisher. So very, very small club at that time. It still remains quite small. I think under 20 people have finished overall. And when I repeated the effort in July 2019, I became the first person to repeat the route. So I've hiked it northbound and southbound. My first White Mountain Direttisima was in a primarily unsupported fashion in a time of 8 days, about 8 days, 8 hours. And my second White Mountain Direttisima was in a fully supported style. So I had friends and family kind of meeting me at road crossings, and I completed that in 6 days, 18 hours. And that was the last round of my single year grid. And I don't know, man, this is just a super special route to me, super, super special route. And so many people, and this kind of goes back to, Chaunce's question, why would you want to hike these peaks over and over again? I think it kind of speaks to the idea that there are so many ways to see these high points. Yes, we're focused on getting to 48 high points every month, but at the same time, there's so many ways to get up there. And this is one of the rarest of the rare, methods to see the 48 is to hike them and then walk all of the miles in between. And to me, it's just like the most purist driven approach to see these peaks. It's, like I said, something that still not a lot of people have bitten off. I think there's under 20 finishers. And man, if you stack this thing up against any of like the shorter long distance trails, like on the East Coast and really like across the country, something like the Long Trail, the John Muir Trail, I think in terms of difficulty, the White Mountain Direttisima stacks up 100%. 230 miles, 80K of vertical, rocky, rooty, over the Presidentials, over the Franconia Range. I mean, it's imagine going through the AT section, which is only 100 miles through the Whites, and then turning around and walking back, and then turning around and walking another 30 miles. I mean, and you're going to walk away with more vertical, because on the AT, you're not going over all the high points. You're kind of skirting around them, especially in the Prezzies. So it's a route that commands respect. And I think, the grueling and brutal nature of that route in the same way that is true with the single year grid is a reason why you don't see more people biting this off, because it is very rare. It's very difficult. It commands your full respect. You must give yourself fully to the route if you want to walk it in its entirety, regardless of the style. And, you go over all the big boys, man. The Presidential Range, the weather up there is wild. And it doesn't matter if you do it in 6 days, doesn't matter if you do it in six weeks, which, there's people been out there for about a month sometimes, putting the miles in. You're going to experience, a lot of different things in those hills on a trip like that.
So the first thing that I'm curious about is the route itself. Is this all on trail? Is it trail to country roads? Are you doing some off-trail stuff? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a couple different variations. If you look at the people who've completed the route, there's a couple different variations. I would say maybe like 90% of the route is the same for most people, with the variations occurring in a couple sections where there are some road walking. So you have to walk from the Kilkenny Ridge area over to the Presidentials, which is about 12 miles on gravel and dirt road. And then there is also a section of the route in between Mount Lafayette, which is a very well-known peak on the AT, on the Franconia Ridge, and Owl's Head. And anybody who's hiked the 48 4,000 footers or does any kind of peak bagging in New Hampshire knows that the Mount Owl's Head Mountain has a very infamous reputation for being smack dab in the middle of one of the largest wilderness areas in the White Mountains, the Pemigewasset, and it's quite inaccessible. So it's kind of an outlier. To factor this into your route, you have to do one of a couple things. You could do a long out and back from the Appalachian Trail. You basically leave the Gale Head Hut area after climbing Mount Garfield northbound, and you drop it down into the Pemigewasset Wilderness, and you go out to Owl's Head and you climb the slide, and then you double back. Or you can get to the summit of Mount Lafayette and not continue on the AT, actually double back on the AT and drop down to what is effectively the biggest open landslide in the White Mountains, a slide called Lincoln Slide. And you can bushwhack, quote unquote, hike down the slide, get into the forest and bushwhack across to the Owl's Head slide. where you can access the summit of that mountain and then link back up with the AT. So other than like a couple, maybe like 10% of the trail, the route is pretty well defined, pretty consistently followed by most people who hike it. But there are a couple variables there. And that one particular section with Lincoln Slide, I mean, if you end up going down the slide and bushwhacking through the wilderness over to the Owl's Head slide entry point, I mean, you're going to have a wild adventure. It's really, really cool back there. And, it's just crazy, man, because the whites are so popular. There's so many visitors, but you start getting off trail, you start getting to these like little pockets out there. It feels like big country. So, that's the other cool thing is you get off the popular networks on some of these things, especially like the White Mountain Direttisima. You kind of jump off the AT, you jump off the stuff that people always travel, and you start seeing again those pockets that very, very few people have the opportunity to lay their eyes on.
And you mentioned, go ahead, Chaunce.
I was just gonna say, because it sounds like there are well-traveled trails connected, because a lot of people do the 48.
Mm-hmm.
How like steep are they? Because it's also in an area that I know is very steep. As someone who's like not big on exposed heights, is that something that there's like a lot of steep exposed scrambles, or like, because parts of the AT have like, it looks like rock climbing and it's just trail, and when you don't know about it and you get there, it's a pretty fun surprise.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really funny because like working at the Notch Hostel, usually the northbounders like have just come up and over Moosilauke and have just come down the Beaver Brook Trail, which is like insanely,
I hate that trail.
Yeah, it's wild. I lament that trail as well, don't worry. And you kind of see them like come into the hostel like shook, they're like, dude, like, is this what I'm going to be working with for the next 100 miles, But the truth is the AT definitely has some stretches that like some of the pitches on certain stretches of the AT through the White Mountains specifically are just, they really represent the worst of the worst, leaving Galehead Hut, going up South Twin. I remember leaving Pinkham Notch, going up the Wildcat Ridge Trail over the Wildcats was absolutely insane. You're going to find like some steepness and some pitches like that on other 4,000 footers, depending on the route that you take up. But it's certainly not always, in alignment with like the steepest stuff out there. Like usually there's going to be at least one mellow route up the 4,000 footer. And, if it is rocky and scrambly and kind of exposed, as long as you're kind of like reading the guidebook and reading up on where you're going, I mean, you'll be able to identify where that is, how to work through it, and if there are other trails that are also well traveled and that may provide an opportunity to just not even have to deal with that. But at the same time, in the whites, with the kind of vertical and the kind of non-switched back trail network that we maintain out here, I mean, to get up a 4,000 footer, even if you're going up like the smallest 4K, Mount Tecumseh, it's in Waterville Valley, Southern White Mountains, doesn't come near the AT, it's 2.5 miles one way. It's the lowest 4,000 footer, and you still gain about 2,500 feet of vertical, so that's about 1,000 feet a mile. And you're just going to have a hard time coming away with anything less than that, just because of the way that the trail network is and how steep these mountains are. They're not always like rock climbing status, but you're going to walk away with some vert for sure.
So you mentioned, sorry, audio problems. You mentioned that your second attempt, the Southbound Attempts, is that right?
Yes.
That was fully supported. You did it in 6 days. Please tell me that is the FKT.
Oh my God, it's not, man. It wasn't even close. Which actually is kind of representative of how I think fatigued and exhausted I was on the back end of that trip, after fitting in almost 1 million feet in 10.5 months, almost 3,000 miles in 10.5 months. I mean, I know we hike these distances and this kind of vertical much quicker when we're actually like out on trail, backpacking and what have you. But, to be on my feet at work all day and to go up and hike up and down these mountains with, and end up getting, twice the vertical of the Appalachian Trail. I was super tired, man. And even though I was fully supported And even though I had like beautiful weather and the momentum of, 10 months behind me, it was just really, really hard to get the fastest known time, which at that time was 6 days flat. So I finished in 6 days, 18 hours. And the gentleman who held the record at the time, one of the most accomplished and well-known endurance athletes out here in the White Mountains, a gentleman by the name of Andrew Drummond, who runs Ski the Whites, Run the Whites. He held the time at 6 days, and he did it in a self-supported fashion. So even being fully supported on the back end of that project, I was not fast enough to beat his self-supported time in a fully supported manner. So pretty wild stuff. And actually, while I was out working on my latest project, the White Mountains Redline this summer, that time, Andrew Drummond's time was lowered by a gentleman named Will Peterson, who is an AT thru-hiker. I think he thru-hiked the AT a couple years ago. He's a young blood hiker from the Boston area. I think you're going to probably see a little bit more of him up in this neck, but he went out and thru-hiked the White Mountain Direttisima fully unsupported in what is now the current fastest known time, which I believe is 5 days, 13 hours. So, like for 230 miles, maybe a lot of people are looking in on that and saying, that's still kind of soft. Which I hate even saying that, because it sounds ridiculous. 5 days, 13 hours is by no stretch of the imagination soft, but people cover that kind of distance much quicker. But when you look at what you got to go through to get across that 230, 240 miles, the entire Presidential Range, the entire Franconia Range, 80,000 feet of vertical, not on soft, sandy, lovely switchback trails, but on, razor sharp rocks and roots and talus and, ankle biters. I mean, it's crazy, man. Like, to average 40 plus miles a day on that route is heavy.
Yeah, you don't need to convince neither Chaunce nor I. We've both been through it. I remember just being completely drained after like a 17-mile day. So to me, 6 days seems unfathomable. But
yeah.
So you already planted the seed about your White Mountain Redline FKT. So
Yes.
Again, let's first start off with the definition, and then I guess take us through the experience.
Yeah. So again, kind of getting back to the list-based culture of the White Mountains, another very, very popular list is the White Mountains Redline. And this is a list of the 652 primary trails that are listed in the official White Mountains Guide, written by a gentleman named Stephen Smith, who owns the Mountain Wanderer bookshop in the town of Lincoln, and published by the Appalachian Mountain Club. So this is the official guide to the White Mountains. This is the White Mountains Bible. And in my mind, back in 2018, before I started the single year grid, like the goal was not just to complete the single year grid. The goal was to complete the single year grid and the Redline, both in record times in back-to-back years, even though the grid, spread across 18 and 19. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to hold the fastest known times for what I saw as the two, biggest mile for mile, vertical foot for vertical foot, two most iconic list-based pursuits in the White Mountains simultaneously. That to me felt like a really heavy, really difficult goal that had a much higher likelihood of failure than it did success. And so after I finished the single year grid and kind of, recoup from that experience, got my head back to a good place, felt recharged, I immediately refocused and set my sights on the next task, which was hiking the White Mountains Redline, not only in the fastest known time, but in a single summer season. So I wanted to complete, the fastest known time Redline, which at the time was 193 days. I wanted to not only complete the fastest known time for the Redline, but I wanted to hike it between, June 20th, 2020, and I believe September 22nd, 2020, a single summer season. And up until that point, it had never been attempted before. It had never been completed before. And I think the reason for that is just because of the vastness of the network. So if you look at the official mileage for the Redline, it's 470 miles. That's clean miles. If you look at how many miles I actually hiked on the Redline over the summer, I averaged, I think I ended up with about 1,950 miles. So that was about 25% backtracking. And I had a lot of support this summer. I had a lot of friends and connections in the White Mountains that were able to drop me at trailheads. They were able to, facilitate rides to places that helped me get through certain stretches in the most efficient way. I felt like I was constantly focusing on, what the most efficient route was in any given section. And I still walked away with 25% of my total mileage being mileage I'd hiked before. And that's just because it's unavoidable. Like there's just a lot of trails a lot of sections of trail you'll need to rehike because you're trying to get to other sections. And it was just as difficult, if not more difficult, than the single year grid for a multitude of reasons. But like I said, to kind of make a long story short, on the 21st of June, the first day of summer, the first full day of summer, less than a year after finishing the single year grid, with a lot of preparation and a lot of, long, hard looks in the mirror, I started on the AT, leaving Hanover, New Hampshire, which is part of the Redline. And I went out and I attempted to hike that entire network as quickly as I possibly could. Obviously, there are a lot of stories in there in that whole summer. But at the end of the day, I ended up finishing about 5 days short of my goal. So a complete summer season would have been 652 trails in 93 elapsed days. And I ended up coming in 99 and a half days. So just over an official summer season. And it's so interesting, right? Because like in the Northeast peakbagging culture and this list-based culture, we're super specific about how we measure the season, right? So we measure it down to the minute. And a lot of people don't even realize this. Like on the 20th of June, the first day of summer, there's an actual minute, an actual hour and minute where the solstice begins. And the same thing with the autumnal equinox. If you're just talking about something like the AT or the PCT, we use this seasonal term or this season in a little bit more of a general sense. Like, if I was going to say, oh, Zach thru hiked the AT last season, or Zach thru hiked the AT last summer. Like that's just that's acceptable verbiage. You don't necessarily have to fit your hike into 9 months to have that be an accurate way to describe what you did. But in the very meticulous, very nuanced peakbagging culture of the Northeast, unless you're starting and finishing between those very specific times, which is measured down to the minute, it doesn't matter how close you are. It's a great effort. It's close, but not quite there. And so, for me, I walked away, like I said, with about 1,950 miles and 545,000 feet of vertical. So over half the vertical of the grid, 500,000 feet of vert in 99 days. That was 94 days faster than the previous fastest known time. So I took three months off the previous fastest known time. And it was very much the same situation of the grid, had a bunch of finishers of the grid, and then one outlier, Sue Johnston, who did it in a calendar year, and I went and lowered her time. Same thing with the Redline. You had a bunch of finishers, one outlier, a gentleman by the name of Matthew Hickey, who went out and did it in a single year, 193 elapsed days. And then I came along and tried to fit it into a single summer season, which I did fall slightly short on, but in kind of an unexpected surprise, or sort of with an unexpected benefit, in the wake of that quote failure, or in the wake of what I like to think of it as not quite hitting my true potential. I now realize very quickly that this is opening up the doors for a second attempt to actually go back and right my wrongs and to kind of create a narrative similar to the one that I've always kind of seen in my head. Like this is, you know, we talk about fastest known times and we've talked about other players in the game up here, but I've never really wanted to like go after anybody's record. This hasn't been like a competitive thing in that respect. This has always 100% been, you know, me versus my own self. You know, what limitations can I break through? You know, what limitations that I'm setting for myself, you know, can I break through? And so, you know, now I find myself in a really unique situation where we're about, you know, five months out from the start of summer. And I'm putting in about an hour or two every single day to get together, you know, a Redline booklet and get all of my days planned and get every T crossed and every I dotted in an attempt to step up to the plate one more time this June 21st, and go out and give the single season Redline one more really, really hard swing. Cause like I kind of said, I don't see it as a failure, but I do see it as like a misstep in terms of reaching what I think is possible, both like in, you know, White Mountain peakbagging and endurance, and also like within my own self. So, you know, in the moment, it always feels like the end of the world, but now kind of being on the other end of it and having a more focused vision for the future and knowing I'm going to get at least one more shot. I'm really, really excited to continue just like my kind of little dance with this thing, man, because like I said, no one's even thought about taking on the Redline in this capacity. Like the Redline, we talk about, you know, how well traveled the trail networks are on the 4Ks, the 4,000 footers. This is the antithesis of that, man. This is like, you know, the Wild West on the East Coast. This is parts of New Hampshire that are so far removed that they feel completely lawless. They feel like parts of Northern California or something. We're talking about parts of New Hampshire that have trails where literally, you know, on your Gaia, there's a trail leading out in front of you. But like when you actually, you know, look out, there's nothing there, and everything in between. It is a dance across a very complex and varied trail network. And that just adds to the allure and the, yeah, like I said, the complexity of this project, man. It's very, very cool to kind of be in the midst of this thing right now.
In addition to how difficult that is, just from like how poorly marked and rugged the trail is, I think just without really knowing anything, logistically, this sounds like the most difficult of your New Hampshire feats. Is that accurate?
100%. Yep.
So how long does it take for you to plan and plot all of how you're going to, the order of the trails and how you're going to hike them and how you're going to get from one to the other? Like that seems like that's a year-long project in and of itself.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I didn't quite appreciate the reality of that on the first go around. So you know, I had a friend who's very well known in the hiking community out here, and otherwise, a woman by the name of Rebecca Sperry, Socked In Hikes, and
yeah, she's a long-time Trek contributor.
Yeah, man, she's very, very cool. And she's also a bit of a Redline connoisseur herself. And, you know, we kind of connected because last year she was planning on trying to complete the Redline in a single year. And knowing my plans and what have you, she kind of reached out and we connected beforehand. And she was super, super gracious in terms of like showing me her whole planning guide, her whole strategy, her whole, you know, Redline Bible, as she called it. And, you know, gave me a lot of really helpful insights in terms of how to plan this out and how I might go about creating a booklet of my own. The problem is that I didn't realize how much time I would effectively lose by not having that kind of a system in place. So I looked at everything that she did, totally appreciated it, probably, you know, planned out my first 200 or 250 miles, you know, of a 2,000 mile project. And just kind of figured that I'd get out there. Once I ran through the miles, you know, once I ran through everything I had planned, I was kind of going to treat it like a AT through hike or something. That's what I was like kind of thinking, like, oh, it's cool. We plan our first week, we plan our first 2 weeks, and then like we're vibing and we have the gist of this thing and we're just going to ride it. Right. And also I'm coming off the single year grid. So I know I have like this, I'm feeling very confident in terms of what I can do in a physical sense on the trail. And I just relied way too much on that physical prowess, on that psychology that it doesn't matter how complicated it is. It doesn't matter how complex the trail network is. It doesn't matter how far I have to drive in between these trailheads. It doesn't matter like how long it takes to actually find these trailheads, because that was like part of the issue too. It's like you're out in the middle of nowhere. Some of these trailheads are on private property. Some of these trailheads don't exist in the way that they do when they were written in the guidebook. And so you're kind of navigating all of these other unforeseen variables. But I thought that like just my physical capacity was enough to compensate. I thought to myself, I don't care how long all of these logistical complexities are going to take. I've got 20s in my pocket. I've got 30s in my pocket, 40s in my pocket, typical like hiker stuff, man, just getting a little bit too confident, I guess, especially like I said, coming off the single year grid, which was such a tough project for me. And I got out there and I blew through those 200 miles so quick. I was averaging like, over 20 miles for the entire summer. I think over the 99 elapsed days, I averaged something like 19.6 miles a day, which like isn't astronomical, but when you take into consideration everything that you have to do to get in and actually hike those 19.6 miles, it's pretty crazy. And once I got through all of my all of the routes that I had created beforehand and planned beforehand, it was just, for lack of a better description, man, it was a full struggle bus. It became very clear, absolutely immediately after I got through all of the routes that I had pre-planned, that it was just totally asinine to think that I was going to be out there averaging 20 to 25 miles a day, resupplying myself, getting adequate rest, and still somehow finding a block of time every night to like plan out what my next day or 2 or 3 days was going to be. I mean, I just didn't appreciate how difficult that was going to be in the field, versus doing it at home behind the comfort of your computer. And it was just like a massive miscalculation on my part. And, I've spent probably like the first 2 months out of the 3 of the single season Redline attempts, kind of ignoring the fact that I was struggling and falling behind my goal. And it wasn't until like that 3rd month when I really filled out the spreadsheet and saw where I was percentage wise and what have you, that I came to terms with the fact that like, dude, it doesn't matter if you have 30s or 40s or even 50s in your pocket. Like you have to get to the trail to actually execute that. And more often than not, like a 50-mile day is going to be like 2 or 3 different trailheads. It's not like on the AT, wake up at a shelter, cruise 30, go to sleep, wake up in the same place, cruise to the next shelter 30. And just like, that's only broken up by like quick stops into town. It's the antithesis of that. And, the fact that I even came in at 99 days was pretty insane. I shouldn't have finished that quickly. Like when I was on day 60, so 2/3, a little behind 2/3 of the way through the time of the red line. I mean, I was like well below 60% complete when you look at the total mileage, and I saw that and I started to freak out and I started to realize the miscalculations I was making. And I still had that mindset, like, dude, you're a thru hiker, you're 2/3 of the way through the Triple Crown, you got the single year grid, like you can do this. But it had nothing to do with the physical capacity. It had nothing to do with how badly I wanted it. It had nothing to do with how hard I could throw down. It's like, you got to get there. And not only do you got to get there, but you got to resupply your food. I was living out of the back of my car at the time, changing the ice in the cooler, keeping all the fresh food, trying to stay plant-based, trying to stay healthy. It was just insane. And so, Zach, that's a very, very long-winded response to your question, which was, what kind of time does it take to put a route together like that? And what I'm finding now, in the wake of all those mistakes and in the wake of not spending much time at all planning or plotting last year, what I'm finding is that it takes an astronomical amount of time, and that there is no secret sauce. There's no trick. There's no way around it. You gotta pull up CalTopo. You gotta pull up Gaia. You gotta have your White Mountain National Forest set of maps in front of you, and you gotta take your pointer finger and you gotta trace it around these lines, and you gotta count the mileage, and then you gotta record it, and then you gotta stop, and then you gotta trace your finger around a different way and see if you can see if you can get something that is both efficient, but also conducive to, to not repeating a ridiculous amount of the mileage that you've already put in, which, like I said, that is unavoidable. Yeah, man, it's very complex. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of attention to detail. It's a lot of planning, replanning, plotting, replotting, and really kind of like swimming through a seemingly endless ocean. But, at the same time, like, at least for me, resting on that knowledge and that confidence that I've actually seen this and done this once before. And I'm using everything that I gained from that experience to try to make this one a little bit more masterful.
Yeah, it seems like it definitely requires a certain personality type to even be capable of doing, like, in addition, like you mentioned, in addition to just the physical prowess to do something like this, like, you have to be a kind of a meticulous, very type A nut job to make something like this happen. Like, there's so much that happens behind the scenes. So kudos to you for being the complete skill set for bringing this together. So we're running up against the tail end of what we've got for our interview time here, but I do want to do a quick, like, rapid fire round of questions for you, if that's cool, similar to the previous segment that I introduced here. And given that
it just needs to be as entertaining as Fuck Kill Marry. I don't think it can live up to that
hype, but hopefully
come on, Zach,
be pretty close here. There's got to be maybe few people on Earth, if anyone, who's been atop the 48 peaks as much as you. So I'd like to know, like, the best of the 48 mountains in New Hampshire. So let's start with some of the more basic categories. Rapid fire. What would you say is the hardest peak?
Hardest peak for me is usually something with no views and a really, really steep incline. But at the same time, that's also room for being for the peak being one of the 4Ks that I love the most. One of the hardest 4Ks I would say is probably you know what? I'm gonna go with Owl's Head, and the reason why I go with Owl's Head, it's actually, in terms of the physicality, a pretty gentle climb, but it's one of the most remote 4,000 footers. A lot of fords, a lot of river crossings, a lot of steep pitches on the slide to get up there, and a couple bushwhacks on the way as well. So hardest one, let's go with Owl's Head.
What about the easiest one?
Easiest one, I'm gonna go with Mount Womback. Yeah, a peak just over 4,000 feet, a little over 3 miles up, very mellow. You're only going to climb like 20, maybe like a little over 3,000 vertical feet to get up there. So yeah, really mellow in the summer and actually in the winter.
If you could only do one peak for the rest of your life.
Mount Adams, baby. Yeah, Mount Adams. Second highest peak in the White Mountains, second highest peak in the Presidential Range, right on the iconic Appalachian Trail. A ton of beautiful, both well-established and lesser-known routes to get to the summit, which includes a route called Great Gully through King Ravine. Really, really beautiful area. Really, really beautiful pile of rocks.
The worst marked.
Worst marked. Well, I'll actually go back to Owl's Head only because the quote unquote herd path to the summit doesn't exist in the guidebooks or on maps. It's very, very well defined, but it's actually not listed as an official trail in the White Mountains guidebook. So the herd path to the summit of Owl's Head is not only the worst marked, but it could be the only mountain on the 4,000 footers that has no actual markings going up to the summit.
The most underrated.
Most underrated. You know what? Moosilauke. I think a lot of people just kind of see that as a little bit of an outlier on the western edge of the White Mountains. I know it is very, very popular, especially like amongst like the Dartmouth crowd. But people don't realize in terms of 4,000 footers, bang for the buck. I mean, I think it's again about 3 miles, maybe 3.5, 4 miles up to the summit. Very gentle grade, and I mean, man, you've got 360-degree views, full alpine environment. When you're up there in the winter, you might as well be on Franconia Ridge or in the Presidential Range because you can have full-on conditions. And when you're up there with, big views, bluebird days, and a still wind where you can actually hang on the summit, I mean, you can look out to Smart Mountain and Cube Mountain to the south along the AT. You can see the Franconia Ridge. You can see the Kinsman Ridge. You can see Mount Washington in the distance. I feel like I don't hear a lot of people really like hype up Mount Moosilauke a whole lot, but I've been having like Sunday socials on Mount Moosilauke. Like every Sunday I just like roll out to Moosilauke and just have like a nice, easy, chill, beautiful morning up there and enjoy the views. And it's killer, man. It's like my backyard peak.
I'm actually going to let Chaunce take the next few categories because I have to run to the bathroom real quickly. Apologize.
The most overrated.
Most overrated, Mount Washington.
Okay.
Easily. Like that's all you hear people talk about, or like, you'll mention, oh, I live in the White Mountains, or I hike the White Mountains, and oh, have you climbed Mount Washington? I mean, it's like, you don't even need to climb Mount Washington. There's a road up to the top. You know what I mean? And
it does. It does suck. Like, it was so weird on the AT because you go through like, you see tons of people on the AT, but to go over mountain after mountain in the whites that are just like insane, and then you get to the top of this one and it's like you're at like the local mall. It's
exactly.
Like, I can leave now. Like, I'm okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a line to get into, say, Hollister or something on a hot weekend. No, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of development up there, and the Mount Washington Observatory is up there. They do incredible weather forecasting as well as a huge list of other things. So there is a lot of function, but it's totally developed. They've got a train that goes up to the top. I have been up there literally in the summer. Chaunce, I'm not sure if you had this experience, what it was like for you going over Washington, but like there are legit days up there more often than not, like good days you get up there and there is a line to take a picture like at the summit sign. Like you're literally seeing like a stack of like 20 people lined up single file just to like take your picture with the summit sign. And like, I'm super down. I get it. It's iconic. It's an iconic part of New England. You do have insane views out to the presidentials, but like when people, act like Mount Washington is the be all end all, like the golden gem of the White Mountains, I'm just kind of like, pass.
Should I assume that that's also your choice for busiest?
Yeah, absolutely. Mount Washington is crazy, but also the Franconia Ridge. I mean, recently we had to change kind of our parking regulations in Franconia Notch because Franconia Ridge, which is the ridge on the AT, I'm sure you both remember it, that has Lafayette and Mount Lincoln. That ridge is incredibly popular to the point where they had literally miles of cars like parked in Franconia Notch, which is like a very dangerous one lane kind of interstate that goes through the Notch, goes through the Franconia Notch region. And, they had to change parking regulations because there were miles of cars lined up there. So Franconia Notch is really, really popular. The presidentials are really popular, but I will mention as just a little ray of hope, all of these peaks, all of these trails, regardless of how popular they are or how well maintained. I mean, if you go up at the right time of day, specifically sunrise, if you're that kind of hiker where you can get up for sunrise or hike late in the day and stay up for sunset, even Mount Washington, all of the people seem to disappear, and you'd be surprised how many of these summits you can have completely to yourself. It's very cool.
Chaunce, I'm stealing one of your suggestions here. The best name.
The best name. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, like, I'm giving you guys kind of like wild answers here. I kind of got to go back to Mount Washington, not necessarily because of the name Washington, but a lot of times you'll hear people refer to Mount Washington, and even more so now, which is very, very cool, as a name called, I know I'm not going to pronounce this the right way, but I think it's a Gigiokuk, which is the indigenous name for Mount Washington. You know, you'll see this actually on apparel. And you'll see this on some bumper stickers now. And you know, there's also been just kind of a movement where, you know, a lot of people are very interested in kind of calling, you know, places by their rightful indigenous name. And yeah, I've seen that the indigenous name for Mount Washington, I think Gigiokuk. I've seen that pop up quite a bit. So not an official 4,000 footer name yet. But I definitely love the sentiment of like, yeah, connecting back to that indigenous history, and the fact that it's kind of catching on a mainstream level. Very, very cool.
I like that.
Yeah.
And then just to round it out, one to skip.
I mean, to be honest, guys, like I say this a lot, I've loved and loathed every single peak on that list. You know, at a certain point, I've fallen in love with all of them, and I've you know, probably wanted to kill all of them at the same time. And actually, maybe we should play Fuck Kill Marry with the 4K. Yeah, with the 4Ks on the next episode. But you know what? I'm not a big fan of the peaks in the Willie range. So this is Mount Tom, Mount Field, and Mount Willie. The closest like recognizable area that you guys might know of is this is kind of running parallel with like the Zealand area on the AT. So if you remember, Zealand Hut is one of the huts that you hit right before you go past Ethan Pond and get down to 302, which is the starting point for the climb up into the presidentials. There's 4,000 footers there, Tom Field Willie. They've got little like sneaky views. They're not terribly difficult. There's nothing particularly interesting about them. It's a little 10-mile loop in Crawford Notch. Good if you need a little bit of a workout or some time in the mountains, but not really peaks you're going to go after if you're looking for that real like aesthetic beauty that the White Mountains is so well known for.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you for giving us the run through on that. Before we wrap up here, I know that you co-founded an initiative that you're really excited about that happened last year and potentially again this year. Could you shine some light on that?
Yeah, definitely, Zach. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been really cool to get I guess like a little bit of credibility, a few accolades in the hiking community over the last couple of years, but it's also been even cooler to like use some of that momentum and you know, put in some of the work that needs to be done both in the White Mountains and also around the country. So to make a really long story short, last spring, after the police killing of George Floyd, and in the wake of, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement coming to the forefront of the attention of the entire country, you know, myself and my coworker Serena Ryan, who is also the owner of the Notch Hostel, we co-founded what is basically a New England-based Peakbagging initiative. And the Peakbagging initiative basically is calling people to, form groups and climb one of the 48 4,000 footers. But in addition to that, we have different, calls to action. So we want to, not only, raise awareness about racial justice issues that exist in the United States. I mean, that's a given, but we also want to like take some real action in terms of like ending this systemic racism that we see popping up in almost every single part of our country, in our culture. And yeah, lastly, use the initiative as an opportunity to, raise funds for certain racial justice organizations that we kind of think are doing really important, really critical work, in order to support Black and Brown lives. And so we created this organization, Summits in Solidarity, and we had a sign-up sheet. It was wildly successful. Last year, we got almost all 4,000 footers occupied. And it was definitely a point of conversation, in our White Mountain community, which, as no surprise, is comprised primarily of Caucasians, of white individuals. So it felt like a good opportunity to use my voice and a little bit of my pull as a very privileged white endurance athlete that has the good fortune of doing this almost full time. And also, use that voice to speak out to my, fellow white people, and folks that may have never, who are hikers and may have never thought about their own race before, or haven't thought about their own race, or who have thought about their own race and have always wanted to, participate in something where they feel like they have, they have a capacity to make real change or be heard. We just kind of wanted to provide an opportunity for all those things to come to fruition. And also, and this is probably the most important point, aside from just the fundraising, is we wanted to really have people, again, walk away with certain calls to action, certain things that they could do on the back end after their time on the summit to make their participation less performative, because the last thing we wanted to do is just get a bunch of white people up on the 48 and have it be a visual, have it be a performative kind of experience, and then we stop talking about it the next day. So people who signed up for this initiative, they were asked to go back to their neighborhoods, go back to the places where they live, and educate themselves, take certain steps to raise their own awareness, take certain steps to fundraise, take certain steps within their community, again, to take action to end systemic racism. And man, really cool. We're really happy with the way that it came out for the first year. A lot of things to learn, a lot of things to reapply for 2021, but I can tell you 100%, like, we will be doing Summits in Solidarity again. We raised close to $10,000 for Outdoor Afro, which is a very cool outdoor-based organization. We were able to raise close to $10,000 for them, and we'll be looking to do the same this year. And just like a great opportunity for anybody out there to get involved and to help contribute to help contribute their voice to what we think is a very important cause and action.
That's fantastic. Where would someone go if they wanted to get involved with the 2021 version?
Yeah, I would say the best way to stay in touch with all things Summit in Solidarity, we don't have an actual website yet. The best way to find us is both on Facebook and on Instagram, Summits in Solidarity. If you're connected with me on either of those platforms, I'm also posting about them. And last year we had this, I believe, in early July. So it was the 1 month anniversary. I'm sorry, it was June 27th. It was the 1 month anniversary of the death of George Floyd. And so we'd be looking to do 2021's version around the same time, maybe a little bit later. And we're not exactly sure of the definitive format, but follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, stay informed, stay up to date. If you want to be involved, trust me, you definitely will be kept in the loop and have an opportunity to do that.
Well, Phil, thank you so much for your time. I feel like, honestly, we only scratched the surface in terms of your insights and just feats and peak bagging and through hiking. You've done it all. Very impressive stuff. Thank you so much for your time. If you could let our listeners know where they should go to keep up with you, to learn more about your hiking feats, etc.
Yeah, definitely. You guys can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Finding Philip. That is Philip with one L. And you can also find me on the internet, regular old website, www.findingphilip.com. And yeah, those are the best places to keep in touch, especially moving forward as I begin my second round on the red line starting on the 21st of June this year. So we're going to have to get back on Zoom next fall, Zach, and like just get a little 2.0 going, give you an update. We'll do fuck, kill, marry for the 48. We'll just like, you know, cross off all the items.
Can't wait. Philip, thank you so much for your time. This was very enlightening. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye, Chaunce. Thank you.
So I'm gonna have to probably end this unless there's a way to leave. I'm not sure if it gives a leave option. I'm trying to figure out how to not lose the recording.
There's a lot of weight on your shoulders right now, Chaunce.
Hey, don't fuck this up.
Don't fuck this up.
I think we might all have to individually leave, and then I'll be here last, and then I can stop it.
All right, push it now. This doesn't work.
Okay, should I exit?
Yes.
Will I see you guys again?
I don't think so. I think this is goodbye.
Okay. All right, this is goodbye. Yeah, thank you guys so much, man. I can't wait to I can't wait to hear this one.
Sweet, me too. Thanks for coming.
Right. You're awesome, man. All right,
Bye.
Take care. Bye.